things going wrong.
Yeah, probably is going out on the deck at least. Oh yeah.
Hi, I would just like you to know I've already been mistaken for you once.
I was first dressed like that. She was great. Awesome.
They're just like, oh, it's like this is how much time it's happened. I figured you would. I figured you would see that.
It'll be fine. With this thing, I feel like it's so. I mean, I've got to buy. Just it's so easy. And if I feel uncomfortable, I'll just take it. Yep. I know you. It'll be 2 against 3.
Good afternoon. We gather together as family and friends of Stephen Davis to remember and celebrate his unique life. My name is Sherry Woodbury, and I'm the minister here at First Unitarian, where Stephen was a member with Donna. On behalf of his family, I want to welcome you all and thank you for being here to celebrate his life. Though we in this room represent many different connections to Stephen, family, friends, colleagues, fellow churchgoers, we come together for the shared purpose of marking the end of his life. Let us acknowledge that those in this room have lost a dear one, changing our own lives. Each person's experience of grief is unique. Given Stephen's convalescence during this last year and the lingering pandemic, some of those who knew Stephen may not have had the opportunity to see him for quite some time, and so it may not feel quite real that he is gone. For others, for Donna and dear ones who were able to see Stephen, the process of witnessing his surgery and recovery, setbacks and limitations may have brought you sooner into the experience of loss and letting go. As we share grief, gratitude, and memories today, let us make room for all of the feelings that may arise: sorrow, joy, and anger, numbness, loss, or shock, appreciation, tears, laughter, confusion. No authentic feeling is out of place during this time. Together, we reconnect to our relationship with Stephen, and we celebrate his special life. At this time, I'd like to invite forward Stephen's granddaughter, Irene, to light the chalice and the candles here up front. And I share with you these words of Albert Schweitzer as she does that. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Seems fitting there are many candles, and I look out at the many faces of folks whose lives have been touched by Stephen. Thank you, Irene. Carl Donikowski, the partner of Donna's niece, will offer us another gift of music on the cello. By the way, there are little packages of tissues in the pews if anybody needs them. Let us hear now reflections from several people close to Stephen. We'll start with Jacqueline Andrig, a dear friend.
Good to see so many people here that knew Steve. I thought he was an unassuming man who lived, along with being a lawyer and a judge, he lived big, large with his passions, ranging all the way from building remote control gliders. Who even thinks of doing that? Reading medieval history and philosophy, learning classical guitar, reading science of all kinds, hiking, birding, cycling, meditation, and interesting conversation. He was funny and a complicated thinker. He was one of the loveliest people that have ever graced my life, and he had the good sense to marry Donna. I've known Donna since 1964, when both of us were social workers in an adoption agency, and I attached myself to her, and I've never let go. We met with a group of other friends every week, every Friday night, and we called ourselves The Group. It was formed around the women's movement, and the intent was to speak honestly about our lives. And we have continued to meet every Friday, every week for 52 years. Although our numbers are now down to 4, we spent holidays, birthdays, we traveled together, and through all those years, we met every week. We still do. And we find ourselves as interesting and entertaining as we have in those first early years. I met Steve in 1985 and knew instantly that he loved Donna enough to deserve her. The men we loved and married became friends as well. And we celebrated, the group of us, all of our good fortune with the men that we loved, and we shared the loss when they died. And now we share this with each other and his loss. There is a mystery of deep love, I think, that is beyond language. And it's an elusive miracle. Steve expressed it simply by describing the details of an ordinary day with Donna several years ago in a note to Heather and me. I saved the note, I read it over many times. He captured how profound connection is expressed in daily life. He touched the mystery. And here is his note. Jackie and Heather. I had one of the best days of my life yesterday, and I want to share it with you. The only thing of objective significance was a trip to the Lead Center in Nebraska City for Thanksgiving dinner. But the closeness that Donna and I felt and the fun we had transformed the day into something wonderful. We slept late and putzied around the house, taking forever to dress, left in plenty of time and enjoyed the beautiful day and our banal conversation and usually semi-insulting observations on the way down. No radio, just talk. The food was truly surprisingly superb, down-home holiday fare, plus roast beef and green beans with mushrooms on the side for us sophisticated big city folk. We alternated with enjoying our own plates, with stealing bites from each other. We were seated next to the big windows on the north side and could hear the elderly piano player banging out tunes that were older than I am. Trip home was a little quieter, hard to get going on a half-hearted argument when digestion is absorbing all of your energy, then to bed. So that was the day. But I don't have the words to describe the sheer enjoyment of being with Donna and how fortunate I am to have found her. Love you both, Steve. They had 35 years of those ordinary days and quirky fun and deep joy. Thank you.
Stephen's daughters, Ann Pullum and Julie Davis, will take turns sharing now.
Hello, and I'm so glad to see so many of you here. There is a poem by J.R.R. Tolkien that's been resonating with me since my dad died, and I'm just going to start with the first stanza from that. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way where many paths and errands meet. And whither then? I cannot say. My dad was too restless, physically and mentally, to enjoy traveling on schedules that offered no deviation from the fastest route and pre-planned sightseeing. But give him the chance to get off the interstate and move at his own speed wherever he wanted, travel became a delight to him. Finding a new vista, a roadside diner patronized by locals, a 50s era motor hotel to stop in for the night, his eyes would light up like Indiana Jones discovering the lost city. Dad's favorite road was the one that ran from October 23rd, 1935 to December 22nd, 2022. He hiked on that road. As a young teen, he rode horseback along it. As an adult, he ran, kayaked, and bicycled on it. I'm not sure he ever had a destination in mind. He just loved the journey. He followed his road to one marriage that lasted 2.5 decades, and he followed away from that marriage. He followed his road to fatherhood. Then it backtracked and took him back to his own father and a better relationship there. His road took him to a church and then away from most organized religion. It took him to a second marriage that brought him joy. He followed his road with hunting partners and partners in chaos, Bob Sundell, Jack Henley, Dan Murphy. On it, he learned countless things: guitar playing, growing roses, photography, making the model airplanes, working with stained glass, making fishing flies, anything that was chaotic and messy, basically. He loved that. Sometimes he got damaged, as we all do. Sometimes he caused damage, as we all do. The second stanza of Tolkien's poem refers to leaving the road with weary feet and turning toward the lighted inn, my evening rest and sleep to meet. It is quite possible that Dad would respond to those lines with, "Screw that shit." He did everything he could to stay on his road. He lost many loved ones when he reached its end, in particular his father, Carl, and his brothers from other mothers, Dan Murphy and Jack Henley. But there were his wife, Donna, my sisters, and me, and our stepsister, Heather, brother and sister by marriage, Alan and Dorothy, their daughter, Lisa, her partner, Carl. There was Jack Henley's widow, Joyce, and Bob Sundell and his wife, Connie. Steve had biological grandchildren and step-grandchildren and even a great-grandson, all of whose lives he wanted to stay in. He still had Buzzy Bee stories to tell. He had walks to go on, books to read. But, like my dad, nature is chaotic and messy, and he had to, reluctantly, leave his road and us. Wherever you are on your own big road, expect to backtrack at times. There's going to be roadblocks that'll turn you back or force you into a different path. But even if you prefer the interstate, leave it sometimes and look around, because it's who you meet and what you learn on the journey that matter. Still round the corner they may wait, a new road or a secret gate, and though I oft has passed them by, a day will come at last when I shall take the hidden paths that run west of the moon, east of the sun. Love you, Dada.
So short. Good afternoon. I so don't want to be here right now doing this because I'm irritated that my dad's dead, but I am glad to see your faces. I am not a terribly articulate person, and I have a lot of difficulty putting down my feelings and emotions into words, much less in front of a crowd. I've been lamenting over what it is that I could possibly say about Steve that most of you don't already know. Yet, I also want to honor my father with my words today, so I'm in a bit of a conundrum here. Then I realized it's not necessarily a story or a tale about him as my dad, or Steve, or Stephen, or Beepa, because he was one of those to all of you here today. There are many, many memories about him that we will cherish and we remember. This is about my grief. And about how very much I will miss the man, the beast, if you will. Grief is defined as deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death. Well, duh, right? It's kind of a gimme. Everyone in this room has experienced it in one way or another. As I've mentioned, I had been struggling with what to say today, and as I was whining about this to my beloved friend Christy, telling her how much time I feel like I had missed being gone for those 25 years when I was living in Colorado and California. And she rather bluntly said, "It's not about then, it's about now. And it's about you being here with him at the end of his life." Which is still, frankly, quite a shocking statement to hear, much less to say. I thought my dad would live forever. Literally, I did think he would live forever. So I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about my grief. It's not an emotion that I'm terribly comfortable with. My first thought that there was no way that I was going to be able to talk about watching him take his last breath without completely losing it, which I still may do, but I will do my best not to. Honestly, I know this sounds horrible, but I really didn't think that that particular event was important enough to talk about. But it is, because that is my grief. That is my deep sense of loss. And these are my feelings. So I got to thinking about it, and ironically enough, I was with my father when his father died. I had driven to the hospital when Granddad was in the hospital. I had driven there, and I don't really even remember driving there. I just remember ending up in the parking lot of the hospital. So I went inside, and Dad had moved into Granddad's hospital room. Kind of like, do you guys remember the movie Arthur? When Arthur moves in to Hobbs's hospital room, and he buys him basketballs, and he makes him wear a cowboy hat. That was what Dad did. However, he did not buy him basketballs, nor did he make him wear a cowboy hat. But it was exactly that scenario. Anyway, so I remember walking into Granddad's hospital room, and I said hi to them both and was just chatting it up a bit. And then Granddad went into cardiac arrest right there in front of us. And, of course, Dad freaked. He lost it. Granddad had a DNR, and I distinctly remember the nurses shooing us out of the room, and Dad was super agitated, telling them to do something, just do something, just do something. I'm sure he was actually yelling, but the nurses just kept saying, we can't. We can't. He has a DNR. I remember taking my dad's arm and leading, more like dragging, I'm sure, him away from the door and down the hallway. And I don't really remember what happened after that. But the end result was that my grandfather died. My father's father died that night. I was also with my father when he took his last breath. My sister Annie had spent her time with him the night before, and when I came up to see him the next morning, which was the day that he died, I remember thinking, I don't know what to think as I walked in the room. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to do. He looked small and frail and uncomfortable, and he did not look like the person that I remembered growing up with his temper and his piercing blue eyes when he was pissed at you. He was mouth breathing, which sucks. Your whole mouth is dry all the time, and I kept using that little tiny water sucker sponge thing to try and keep his mouth wet, try and keep his lips wet. I brought my laptop with me because I had no idea what I was going to do, how long it was going to take, what it was going to look like. I had not a clue. So my other beloved friend, Lori, came up, and she said her goodbyes to my dad, and we sat together. We talked about him, we talked to him, and then when she left, I was alone. I knew it was coming, so I tried to make him as comfortable as possible. I had put my phone next to his ear, and I had played some, I had played some John Prine. I had put on some old Willie Nelson. I had put on some classical guitar. If I would have known he was such a cello fan, I would have thrown some Yo-Yo Ma on the list, but I was not aware. And we talked, or rather I talked, and he listened. And I do know that he was listening because his face would move in recognition of something, or if I said something he didn't agree with, his brows would furrow. So I know he heard me. And then something changed. His breathing changed, and I knew right away as soon as I heard it. So I went to his bedside, and I sat down, and his face was all kind of sticky and oily. So I took a warm cloth, and I washed his face, and I told him that he couldn't go see all of his buddies that were up there waiting for him with the dirty face. And he was not amused at all. He was very annoyed with me. He kept kind of doing this, and he didn't like it at all, but I had to clean him up. And then I told him that it was okay to let go of the golden rope, and that there were so many people up there waiting to see him and connect with him again. His mother, who he had not seen since he was a very young man. His father. I told him that Chucky was up there waiting with a shot of Fireball and a beer, just like old times at the Nebraska games. And of course, Dan and Jack, Don Weber, and so many others that have passed before. I told him that we would take care of Donna, and that I would miss him, and that I would see him again soon. Well, maybe not soon, but I would see him again. What I miss most is his voice. We would walk in the house, and it was always, "Julie, come see your father," calling me from the back deck where he loved to spend his time. So this is my grief, and this is my deep sorrow. It will remain forever, but I suppose, like everything else in life, it will find a place in my heart to live, and I will visit it when I need to. In closing, there are two things that I have been reminded of just in the past few days that I would like to share before I end today. The first is something that Donna shared with me about my dad. And she said, he had always said, let me make sure I get this right. He had always said, never trust anyone that wasn't just a little bit goofy. Which makes it very clear why you were married so long. And why you were so happy together. The second thing is something that came to me just last night. My dad always had a saying, and I had forgotten about it. It was do better. I've been hearing it since I was a little kid because I was constantly in trouble, and I was constantly hearing just do better, Jules, do better. Whenever I got into trouble, which was frequently, do better, Jules, do better. So just do better. Do better as humans, do better as husbands and wives, do better as kids and sisters and brothers and friends and partners and lovers. Just do better as humans and make whatever Steve it was that you had in your life. Remember that and make him proud.
Thank you, Julie. And now Heather Trezise, Stephen's stepdaughter, offers her reflection.
Well, there is a lot of you here. I don't know if I'm just going to repeat a lot of what you already said, what you've already heard, or if I have a new twist on things. This has taken much time and thought to write, as I have so many things I could say about Stephen. It's been nearly 3 months since one of Earth's greatest beings went on his way. Over these life-changing months, I think about life's journey and Stephen's journey in this life, and how grateful I am that we got to know each other. How crazy the path that made him my stepdad. I'm sorry, I can't see. I can't see with my glasses on. It's here. Thank you, Sherry. It was a path that began with a thrown box of crackers. What a simple, irresponsible act. I didn't know Stephen before that box of crackers, like so many of you here today. And I've been thinking about him and about how every life path changes with time. Haven't we all changed with time? Aren't we all different people? With different ideas, and different people, and different interests, with different experiences. And aren't we all shaped by our choices, our loves, our mistakes, our experiences? And the hope is that we learn and grow from these experiences, and that we do better. So what was your life experience with Stephen? hunting, fishing, trucks stuck in the mud, Germany, the courtroom, ballet, diving, softball. Belle, Slicky Boy, Wind in the Willows, books and books and books. Historical facts, other life journeys, margaritas, Fireball, Modelo, that may come up again later. Zesto ice cream, puttanesca, chicken piccata, King Fongs, gliders, planes, bikes, kayaks, guitar, gardens, birds, trees, travels, a love story. Chocolate-covered cherries, any conversation ever. A joke, a song, Husker football, a big red truck, an MR2, a VW bus, tuxedos, t-shirts, laughs, tears, the deck. I have missed so many things, big things and little things. Stephen lived his life with passion and curiosity, and he left no interest unexplored, no page unturned, and now no star untwinkled. He showed us that life's wisdom is gained by having many experiences. Try it, learn it, make it, give it, read it, get dirty, throw a box of crackers. He knew how to live and do better. And so I just leave with this Dakota quote: "We will be known forever by the tracks we leave."
Thank you for all of your sharing, and I can't help notice the do better on your shoes, Heather, as you walked off. As we sit with these remembrances, let us hear another gift of music. Church members Bill Tull and Patricia Will share Going Home by Antonin Dvorak.
Oh.
was waiting too. Lots of folks gathered there, all the friends I knew. All the friends I knew. Morning star lights the way, restless dreams all done, shadows gone, break the day, real life's just begun. There's no end, ain't no break, just a living on. Wide awake with a smile, going on and on. I'm just going home. It's not far, just walk by through an open door. I'm just going home.
Poet Lord Alfred Tennyson wrote, "I am a part of all that I have met." And Stephen is a part of all who knew him. During this time, I invite anyone who would like to do so to share a memory of Stephen. We'll have a mic right here in the middle. You can come on up. You might want to share a story about him or simply reflect on the kind of person he was and what was meaningful to you about knowing him. Please do come forward to the mic so we can hear you well. And if anyone needs it brought to you, just raise your hand and I'll bring it. If there are folks joining us on YouTube who want to share, you can put a comment in the chat and I'll lift that up in a bit here.
Hello, I'm a brother-in-law, and Alan is my name, and some of the most wonderful family memories that we have trace back to what was mentioned a couple of times by others, the deck. We would go over to Donna and Steve's deck, and the deck was so great because it was high up enough that the forest of oaks in the backyard, it was like being in a forest. And we were on the deck, and the conversations, great and small, always included some really interesting information from the brother-in-law. And I think these will be some of the most treasured family memories forever.
Hello, my name's Terry Grennan. I worked with Steve for many years at the law firm of Cass and Tierney, Adams, Gotch, and Douglas. I was a young lawyer. I worked with Steve on the Pathfinder case when the hotel in Fremont blew up 1976. I was a young lawyer, one of the longest civil trials in Nebraska history. And so I had a great opportunity to work with Steve. And I learned an awful lot working with Steve. He was a great mentor. As the program says, he was all of those things, particularly a mentor. Steve was a strong advocate, but gracious. His word was good. He was gracious in victory, gracious in defeat. He was good to young lawyers in his courtroom and in the office. And that's, you don't appreciate that until you get older. I think his strongest suit, particularly with juries or judges, he was sincere and well prepared. And like I said, he was a strong but gracious advocate. Steve was what lawyers call a bad ball hitter. He could make the best of a really bad situation. It was great. How many times he'd offer somebody $20,000, they wanted 30, and the jury'd come back for 10. And I said, I don't know how you did that, Steve, but it was. And Steve could put a case together at the end like I'd never seen anybody do. And he would. Steve would get very intense. And as law firms grew, offices change. And I could always tell when Steve was going to try a case because the hallway was lit up like a runway. And he would be in my office at the time because it was his old office. So I knew he would, and then he would always try and quit smoking. And I've never smoked, but he and Henley would go around and Mike Kenny and go, all right, I know we have a $100 bet, but can you give me a break on this one? So we'd give him a break. And then he'd say, now, if I ask for a break, don't ever give it to me. That's as good. Trying to keep track of that was unbelievable. Steve was also, he would be so intense on working hard and doing his job, he'd forget things, like going into my office. Or the office manager, Nan, and several people said, why do you have 4 copies of that brief? I'd say, because I'd have 2. I'd give Steve 2. He would lose 1. Then he would lose the other one. So then he'd come in and take one of mine. So I always had one hidden way away so that he couldn't get it. So that was, but he was a very quick study. And like I said, very sincere and gracious to other lawyers. And a lot of younger lawyers practiced in front of him and said he was fair. And he kind of had a special place in his heart for them that you don't see anymore. People would call me and say, I'm going to try a case in Steve's court. What do I need to know about Steve? I said, well, Steve has several favorite cases. One of them was called Danny's Construction Company. We were working on something, and he thought he was just fascinated by that case. So I said, if you got a divorce or an antitrust case, work that in somehow. and Steve will find a way to rely on it. But he was, like I said, a great mentor and a great friend, and learned an awful lot from him. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Lo Pullum. I'm one of his granddaughters. I never knew the man that most of you knew. I was too little. I only ever knew him as my grandfather. And I never really saw myself in him. If I look at my mom, my Aunt Stephanie, my Aunt Julie, my sister, my cousin Ethan, I can see him in them. I can see his charisma, his temper, his vague chaos, gremlin tendencies. But I never really saw him in myself. I look like a person. I'm a ball of anxiety in a human suit. But that never mattered to my grandfather. The thing I always remember about him is that he always accepted me as I was and never demanded explanations. When I was 7 and tired from being around people at Christmas parties for 4 hours and I didn't know how to say, my social battery is drained, I need to be alone, he would just tell me to go upstairs and never let anyone bother me. I don't remember if I ever actually sat down and told him, I'm bi, because I knew it wouldn't matter to him. And in a family of red wine snobs, he was always happy to have someone to share the ridiculously sweet plum wine with. I think of everyone in his family, I'm the least like him, but he always just accepted me as I was, no questions asked. Maybe that's the way I'm like him. In any event, I'm really glad that I had him in my life.
For the first 24 years of my life, BPA introduced me to people as his eldest unmarried granddaughter. When I got married, I became the eldest married granddaughter. BPA was one of the biggest influences on my life. So normal grandparents, they play things like slapjack and war and go fish with their grandchildren. No, by the time I was 5, I was well-versed in historic American authors because we played a card game called Authors. I knew he didn't think much of James Fenimore Cooper because he referred to him as James Fenimore Pooper. When I was 10, for my birthday, he took me to the old Borders that used to be on 72nd and Dodge. It was a 2-story bookstore. I thought I had died and gone to heaven, and he let me pick out whatever I wanted. He always fostered my love of reading, my love of knowledge, my love of history, my love of government. Although the one time I did ask him to speak to my high school class, he told me his social calendar was too full. One of the greatest privileges of my life was to introduce him to his great-grandson and see the incredible joy on his face meeting Deacon for the first time. The day he passed was the first day of holiday break for me from school. And I was trying to get my son to sleep. He was restless. We were laying down. He couldn't settle. And then suddenly the room went still. No noise, no furnace noise, no fan noise. It went still. My son went still, which for an 18-month-old is rare. And I knew. He was gone, and he stopped by. So don't stay away too long, Beepaw. I'll look for you in the bumblebees.
Thank you for gifting us with the memories, and the feelings, and the stories of Stephen. It's precious. I did not have the privilege of meeting Stephen, but in the sharing of others, I witnessed a person who embraced life with a curious mind and an open heart. Adventurous in his many hobbies, as we've heard, both indoors and out. Honest and humble as an arbiter of justice. Funny, loving, gentle with his dear family and friends. And in his spiritual journey, one who listened to the testimony of his own life experience and followed where it led, clear to the uncertain frontier of death. Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron writes, "A warrior accepts that we can never know what will happen to us next. We can try to control the uncontrollable by looking for security and predictability, always hoping to be comfortable and safe. But the truth is that we can never avoid uncertainty. This not knowing," Chodron says, "is part of the adventure. It's also what makes us afraid." From all that I have learned of Stephen, he seems to have embraced the adventure, making friends with the uncertain nature of life and death as a human being. Maybe that's why he was so comfortable with the chaos around him. But for those of us who remain here, in bodies that age and ail, with memories that stir grief, with senses that miss the presence of one we know who is now gone, we may struggle more with the uncertainty of life as we endure loss. Whatever Stephen was, is to you, colleague, friend, father, dearest mate, in any moment when you feel groundless without him, I invite you to lean into that with tenderness. The way that a masseuse or a physical therapist might encourage you to notice and accept a bodily pain that is therapeutic, the kind that hurts so good as you gently rest into it and let it release when it is ready. One can relax into grief and missing in the same kind of way. And regardless of what you do or don't believe about death and what comes next, you can practice being present to your own feelings as they show up in your body and your heart. And I think we've had good modeling for that here today of just letting it be what it is. I imagine there are a variety of beliefs held among us about what waits beyond this life. Death is the fate and physical end of all living beings. We can acknowledge that. But what is death? Writing on The Wilderness of John Muir, Edwin Way Teale echoes the Dvorak song we heard earlier. This is what Teale writes. "The rugged old Norseman spoke of death as heimgang, homegoing. So the snowflowers go home when they melt and flow to the sea, and the rock ferns, after unrolling their fronds to the light and beautifying the rocks, roll them up closed again in the autumn and blend with the soil. Myriads of rejoicing living creatures, daily, hourly, perhaps every moment, sink into death's arms, dust to dust, spirit to spirit, waited on, watched on, noticed only by their maker, each arriving at its own heaven-dealt destiny." Teale continues, "All the merry dwellers of the trees and streams and the myriad swarms of the air, called into life by the sunbeam of a summer morning, go home through death, wings folded, perhaps in the last red rays of sunset of the day they were first tried. Trees towering in the sky, braving storms of centuries, flowers turning faces to the light for a single day or hour, having enjoyed their share of life's feast, all alike pass on and away under the law of death and love. Yet all are our siblings and cousins, and they enjoy life as we do, share heaven's blessings with us, die and are buried in hallowed ground, come with us out of eternity, and return into eternity. So writes Edwin Way Teal. The images he draws from flora and fauna around us and above us are evocative. I believe life is like that part of nature below us as well. Here on the eastern edge of Nebraska, where the rock layers were laid in the Paleozoic era and the peak and saddle forms of the less hills shape the landscape, the land reminds us that life is like geology too. There are layers of history and mystery as you go down, 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 deeper into the life of a person such as Stephen. Marvelous crystals, as in his moments of joy, his peak experiences, his everyday experiences with his beloved. Hidden caves, those things he may not have understood about himself, what was left in his unconscious. Fascinating striations where his life mingled with others. Underground aquifers that fed him in all his curiosity and creativity and exploring. Life is like geology. And perhaps death is like geology too. The particles that make up rock never disappear. They only change form. Sedimentary rock under heat and pressure becomes metamorphic. Metamorphic rock, when melted, turns into magma, and hot flowing lava cools to igneous rock. Just as matter does not disappear, it is transformed from one substance to another. Some believe that we have a spiritual core, which does not disappear, but goes home. Many sages and scriptures express this idea in one way or another. In the language of the Bhagavad Gita, for example, there exists not only the self with a small s, you and me, small and separate individuals as we usually think of ourselves. There's also the self with a capital S, a dimension greater than our bodies and our distinct identities. In this understanding, the self with a capital S is our true self. Consider this passage from the Gita, which speaks of this self with a capital S. What is real never ceases to be. The unreal never is. The sages who realize the self know the secret of what is and what is not. Know that the self, the ground of existence, can never be destroyed or diminished, for the changeless cannot be changed. Bodies die, not the self that dwells therein. Know the self to be beyond change and death, therefore strive to realize the self. Now, what does that mean? What is real never ceases. If Stephen was real, if any of us is real, then according to this perspective, the realest part of him still exists. Not in the same form as before, voracious reader and outdoorsman, robed in honor, loving companion through daily tasks, but some essence endures. And Stephen is not the only one who has been transformed. He's changed the world by his presence, his journey, his love. He has changed those who knew him, and cascades of people that he never met. He remains among us in our memories and his still rippling influence. While I'm partial to the Gita, it is the Persian mystic Jalaluddin Rumi who offers what is to me a most compelling image of what happens at death. He uses the metaphor of a drop of water and the ocean. The drop, of course, is an individual like Stephen. The ocean is what one might call collective consciousness, or God, or the self with a capital S. Rumi writes, "Do not think the drop alone becomes the ocean. The ocean, too, becomes the drop." Rumi is saying that not only do we join some greater spiritual essence when the body dies, he's saying also that the life of each person changes the whole of which we are all a part. Do not think the drop alone becomes the ocean. The ocean, too, becomes the drop. Rumi is saying that Stephen's life has enriched and expanded not just all of our lives, but all of life, life with a capital L, forever. Well, after all of this exploration of what death may mean, I circle back to uncertainty, the kind of uncertainty that Pema Chodron encourages us to relax into. My colleague, Kenneth Collier, puts it this way: I do not know where we go when we die, and I do not know what the soul is, or what death is, or when, or why. What I know is that the song once sung cannot be unsung, and the life once lived cannot be unlived, and the love once loved cannot be unloved. I do not know with certainty either what happens after death. It's the final mystery. But I suspect that Stephen met death in the same way he met the uncertainties of life, with care and curiosity. What will come next? We can greet grief when it comes to us with a similar sort of open-hearted spirit. Pema Chodron says, things falling apart is a kind of testing and also a kind of healing. We think that the point is to pass the test or to overcome the problem, but the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again, and then they fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing, Chodron says, comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, for relief, for misery, for joy. And so let us honor and celebrate Stephen's life. Let us bow before the mystery of his homegoing. Let us be present to our own moment-to-moment experience of memory and grief. And let us be grateful for the life and love that we have known through Steve. May it be so. Amen. invite you to join me in a litany of remembrance for Stephen. This responsive reading comes from Roland B. Gittleson. And after each line I share, you may respond with the words italicized in the program. The repeating refrain is, "We remember him." And when it's your turn, I'll cue you like this. So let's practice that. All right, you got it. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, in the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, in the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, in the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, in the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, in the beginning of the year and when it ends, when we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joys we yearn to share. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him. A reception will be held at Jackie Endrick's home after the service. The address is in the program. It's about 15 minutes west of here if you take I-80. The family, some of the family will join me here in the foyer, so you can also greet them and offer your condolences before leaving the church. Please also know that I and our caring team are available to offer support privately. I echo again the words of Albert Schweitzer before extinguishing the chalice. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us.